Let's start with a word of prayer, and we'll start in Genesis chapter 18. Father, we thank you for your word and your truth, and we just pray that your Spirit guide us today as we look and speak and study your word, and we just pray that you open our eyes to the wonderful things in your Torah. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. Vayera is the Torah portion, yes, and he appeared a little, and go ahead, Mark, Genesis 18, 1 through the end of 8.
Genesis chapter 18, 1. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great oak trees of Mamre while he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day. Abraham lifted up his eyes and looked and saw 3 men standing across from him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself toward the ground. He said, "My Lord, if I have found favor in your sight, please do not pass by your servant. Please let a little water be brought and wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. I will bring a piece of bread so that you may refresh yourselves. After that you may pass on, now that you have come to your servant." And they said, "So do as you have said." So Abraham hurried into the tent unto Sarah and said, "Quickly, prepare 3 measures of fine flour, knead it, and make cakes." Then Abraham ran to the herd and took a choice and tender calf and gave it to the servant, who hurried to prepare it. He then brought butter and milk and the calf that he had prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate.
Amazing. So, you realize that Abraham here is 99 years old, and he runs out to meet. He runs out the tent door to meet these 3 men. He just circumcised himself in the previous chapter. He was sitting there. Notice that it says in verse 2 that he lifts his eyes. That means how is he sitting? With his eyes hanging down like, this ain't no fun. It's hot.
He went up.
I don't feel good. And he gets up at 99 years old after just having circumcised himself with a piece of flint, obsidian to be specific, and runs out there. I say he walked out there. He casually strolled out to meet the men. No, he ran out there to meet him. Now, it's very interesting because one of the things about the Bedouins, and Abraham basically would have been what we would consider a Bedouin today. He's out there. He's just traveling. He's not a man of any particular country. Nobody's bothering him. And their hospitality is incredible, even to this day, be they Arabic or whatever their national or whatever their background may be. Just that whole Bedouin culture is, we're here to serve you. Is that true? You know, you lived over there for many years. Okay, you lived over there, and even today, you would think with all the drama that's going on in the world, the drama don't bother these folks. The drama has not interfered with the Bedouins at all. Okay, it really hasn't. So, come on in, have a seat.
You have to be very careful with them, PJ. If you tell them that you like something that they're wearing, a shirt or a kafir or something, they'll give it to you.
And be insulted if you don't take it.
Be insulted if you don't take it.
Yeah, they expect you to take it. And so you do. That's true. You have to be careful what you say. And the other thing, and so they are known, the Bedouins are known to this day for hospitality. I mean, it doesn't matter if they're Muslim or what. The further out in the boonies you are, the more hospitable they are. And that's just their culture. But it also, if you think about it, it's a great way to get along with people. You're out in the middle of nowhere. You really can't defend yourself to any great degree, unless you happen to have quite an army, and most of them don't. And so it's way better to just be hospitable and get along with people. And why can't we all just get along, And but that is their culture, and even to this day, I mean, they don't think anything. The other thing that's very interesting about this, that Abraham becomes known as he's the father he's really the father of hospitality in all cultures. But what he does here is very interesting. It's honestly, and I want y'all to hear this. What he does is the absolute opposite of what most people have been taught to do today. What does he promise them? Look really close at what he promises them. If I've found favor, don't pass by your servant. I'm your servant. I'm here to help you. I'm my Lord. He's Adonai. Okay, he like Adonai. Okay, he's humbling himself. Let me hear. Let me give you not a bunch of water. Let me just get you a little water. Let me get you. Is it all right if I just get you a little bit of water? Just not maybe just a little bit. Because right here in the desert, you just need a little bit of water. Okay. Let me get you maybe just a morsel, a little piece, a little bit. That literally, the word that's there just means a bit. Let me just get a little bit of bread, just a little piece of water, a little bit of bread. Maybe we have communion here. This is what it sounds like. I'm kidding, But that's really what it sounds like. I mean, just a little piece of bread. It might be moldy. I'll get you some. Okay, and steps inside. They go, okay, do as you said. He goes into his wife. 3 measures of flour. I've calculated this. This is about, it's around, depending on the estimates, I'm just looking at all the notes I've got here over the years where I keep changing the amount, but it looks like it's around 3 to 4 gallons of flour. Just that measure. That's how much. I'm not just a pile of flour. It's like, and so he's not just making them lunch. He's baking them. Basically, he's having her bake a cake that they're going to take with them. He's not just going to feed them a morsel of bread. They're going to eat it, and they're going to take it with them. And then he goes out and takes a, is it a lamb or is it it's a calf. It's a calf. Yeah, it takes a calf from the herd. Did we make it to that? Yeah, a good calf in verse 7. And give it to his young men there. And it's like, prepare it. So this is not just lunch. This is, he's going to feed them, and he's going to send them away with food. What did he promise them? Just a little bite. Just here. Maybe I can just give you a little bit. What does he supply? Abundantly. Now, if you think about our culture today, what have we basically been taught? Oh, I'll do this, and I'll do that, and I'll do that. And the reality is, very often we will talk beyond our ability. I mean, we might be willing if it were possible to do it, but we find out that it's not possible due to time constraints or financial constraints, or very often just time constraints, that we really can't do what we want to do. And so here we've promised all this stuff and can't deliver it. The problem when we do that is people are counting on us to do this, and they've arranged their lives. Very often people promise things, and it's frustrating when they I'd rather you just tell me what you can do, and if you can't do it, that's okay. But when you promise somebody something, now all of a sudden our word really don't mean a whole lot. Go ahead.
He also laid the groundwork when he was making an impression on these potential guests and offering them hospitality. He presented it as if it wouldn't be any trouble at all, nothing out of the way. It would have been a light duty thing, and so that would have made them more readily.
Yeah, he doesn't, that's a good point. He doesn't put them on the spot that they're putting in. That's really the point. It wasn't like, you guys look like you're hungry, I've got some lamb. I can go kill a calf if y'all want me to. I mean, I don't mind. It wasn't like that. He don't even bring that up. So, and that's another thing. It's actually kind of plays in with what you're talking about, the culture, is that you have to be careful what you say over there. Like, man, that's a really nice looking calf. They'll go kill it for you. Okay? And so it's interesting that he does not put them on the spot at all. That's an interesting observation, and that's really part of that same culture. Like, no, I'm just going to bring you a little something. It's not going to be nothing to it. There's probably some moldy bread back there. I'll bring it to you. He don't say that, but that's what he says. Just a little piece of bread. I can find something. And you see that even. I'm just thinking in the Jewish culture, you still see that to this day. And so it was just like hospitality, and for no gain. Just that was her pleasure, and that's what you see in the Bedouin culture. That is their pleasure. That is who they are. And I think we would do well to learn hospitality, actual hospitality, rather than, and we do see that today. I mean, these people are just like, incredibly gracious, and just, and we got to see that at Sukkot as we traveled around and got some awesome meals. And thank you, Judah. It's like big spread over there, like great food in the sukkah. That's, a sukkah is almost like a picture of that culture. Bringing the sukkahs, and really we're stepping back into that culture right there. We do that and go around and share with each other. But it's just really cool to see that, and that we can participate in it today. And again, it's almost like the opposite of the Western culture. I mean, I see so many people promising, and they, like I say, they're not lying. They desire to do it, but they're not being realistic. And pretty soon they're so overloaded they can't do anything.
Well, not only that, it's a me
Right.
culture.
Yeah, it is. And even they promise something. Well, I was going to do it, but I got a chance to go fishing. Or I was going to do it, and I got a chance to do this. Or
I woulda,
but
yeah,
there's no but with Abraham.
right.
He didn't promise too much to start with. Okay, so if something had happened, okay, Sarah, go make some cakes. We're out of gas. The stove's broke. Okay, I know it's a wood-fired, probably a dung-fired oven. Let's get real here. but this is not people they know. This is just in general. So it is very cool to see that this exists. I mean, we talk about the world and just the craziness in the world, and you see this, and this thousands of years ago. But to know that culture still exists out in the middle of the desert, in the middle of nowhere, you see these little tents, and it's safe to walk up there and say, man, I need some water. You're going to get way more than water.
That is amazing. At this point, do you feel that Abraham understood who his guests were?
He knew well, let me ask it this way. Had he already met Yahweh? Had he already spoken to Yahweh?
Absolutely.
He had.
Yes,
so
he did.
he had already met him, and so that's our next subject that's right here. That's why I say we could spend all day on this. It starts out, and Vayera, he appeared, and Yahweh appeared to him by the Hebrew terebinth tree, which is kind of like, it kind of means turpentine. It's like it is probably a type of oak. It means a strong tree. And then it says Yahweh appears to him, and he's hospitable to these three men. And so he lifted his eyes, verse 2, look, and behold, three men. So he sees three men standing there. And so one of them is called Yahweh. How do you deal with that? Was that the Father, the Son, or the Holy Spirit that appeared to him?
Yep.
Yes, it was. Well, it really wasn't all of them, but it was all of them because they're one. And so there are three characters, but what we're going to see, and we'll read on, and you're going to see some definition as to actually who the characters are. One of them definitely is Yahweh, and but in a physical form. And so the idea, and one of the things I like studying the culture and the time is the time frame, is the idea of God in a physical form in the first century was not a problem. It only became a problem in more modern times when it became more of a political, religious problem because of the politics involved, where Rabbinic Judaism basically changed their stance on what they had taught. Originally, obviously you understand God in a physical form or in the form of a man because he's throughout the Bible. It starts in the garden. You see him everywhere. And so there he is, and he walks up and he sits down and he eats with them. He puts it before them. Verse 8, look at verse 8. So he sets butter and milk and the calf which he had prepared before them and stood under the tree as they ate. Notice he didn't sit down with them. So he's just been an absolute servant. He serves them and he steps back. You're my guest. They're the Ushpazim that have come under his oak tree. Hallelujah. Okay. And God had already promised him that he would have a child, and of course he has already had it. The promise was way back. We started in this story in chapter 12, and then in chapter 16 he decides to help God, and Sarah did too, because I know I never try to help God except all the time, and that's when it goes sideways. But they end up with Ishmael, who is a problem to this day. It's like, that's what happens when we get ahead of God. We create situations that, okay, well, you didn't want to do it your way. Have fun with this. Still to this day, we're having trouble with that child right there.
But you remember that Father said he would bless Ishmael and his descendants, despite with those certain promises.
But the blessings that he blessed them with was that they would have, there would be a bunch of them, and there are a bunch of them.
Right, they were earthly blessings.
What he didn't say, interestingly enough, is he didn't say they will be a blessing, which is very interesting. I just thought of that.
Yeah, you're right.
He said he would bless them. So in that culture, a blessing is understood as to having children as a blessing. Okay, and so, but anyway, he says that he will multiply him, and that it would be X number of kings come from him, and that he describes that. Where is that blessing of Ishmael? Yeah, there it is, 16. Angel of Yahweh, messenger of Yahweh, 16:9, said to her, return. And the angel of Yahweh said, I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so they can't be counted. You shall call him Ishmael. His hand will, this is very interesting. I didn't get into this last week, but his hand, verse 12, his hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell, the Hebrew there says, in the face of his brethren. Okay, the east, or the face of his brethren. Then you shall call, and that's what we see. So the blessing is that there would be a lot of them, but the curse is that there's a lot of them. They're going to be in your face. Okay, and so that's exactly what we see. Talmudically, what Rabbinic Judaism teaches about this is not biblical, but I'll tell you what they say. In verse 8, they say that those are two separate meals separated by X number of Talmudic hours, which makes it two separate meals, so that the milk and milk products were out of the stomach before they ate the meat products. And really, there's, and I trust you guys have heard me talk about kosher cheeseburgers. That's not even what they're talking about. They're not even talking about milk and meat when they're talking about boiling kids in mother's milk. That's not even what it means. I'm not going to get into that today, but that's not even what that means. We'll have an opportunity. Rather, I say that this was kind of like the first cheeseburger, so get over it. They're eating milk and meat together.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes?
There's a teaching on TorahGo.com, this kosher cheeseburger.
Okay, so if anybody hasn't seen the teaching on that, what they're really talking about, and it's real simple, real straightforward, and real biblical, is called kosher cheeseburgers. Okay, and it's really simple what they're talking about. It actually has to do with something totally different. So look it up, you'll see it. Thank you for that.
Torah blog.
It's TorahBlog.net. Will take you straight to it. Yes, it's on both. You can go to TorahBoat and you got to go through videos, but if you log on to TorahBlog.net, boom, you're there instantly. And so, that's really what's going on. And that's why there's no issues with this. That's why Yahweh's sitting here eating. So we have Yahweh eating food. Cool. That's all I can say about that. It's cool. Okay, so let's keep going and read 9 through the end of 15.
They said to him, where is Sarah your wife? And he said, there in the tent. One of them said, I will certainly return to you about this time next year, and Sarah your wife will have a son. And Sarah heard it in the tent which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old and very advanced in age, and Sarah was well past childbearing. Therefore Sarah laughed to herself, saying, After I am so old, and my Lord is old also, shall I have pleasure? Then the Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh and say, I surely bear a child when I am old? Is there anything too difficult for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you at this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Then Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, because she was afraid. But he said, Yes, you did laugh.
You know, I feel for Sarah, because I think there's been times where I've kind of said to the Holy Spirit, like when I was getting convicted of something, like, I didn't really mean that. And he's like, yes, you did. He was like, you can't get away. He's like, you can't get away with anything. He's like, yes, you did. I know what you thought. That's so, you know, and one of the things I encourage people when we're, you know, when we're repenting and, you know, even in private, it's like, oh, I hate to admit things like that. It's like, he already knows. How are you going to surprise God with anything? If he was going to send down a lightning bolt, it would already hit you, you know? He's waiting for you to repent, okay? And walk away from it. What was it that God asked him to do, even with Ishmael, that, you know, I'm sure Abraham just jumped up and was like, oh yes, cool, I can't wait. Let me get a sharp piece of flint and just go at myself and my son, who's 13. You imagine this 13-year-old. 13-year-olds are usually real, like whatever dad wants to do is just real cool. I want to just like whack that off. Oh yeah, no problem, Dad. Let's go for it. I bet that was an interesting conversation. I know it would be with a 13-year-old today. You know?
Probably had to tie him down.
I was like, all right, I'm going to need some help over here. Chokeholds are okay. But seriously, but that is but really seriously, he is the age of accountability, and so hopefully in that culture it would be really different than a 13-year-old in our culture, where they realize that a 13-year-old, you're on your own, you're responsible. You know, it's life and death. It's, you know, the games are over.
And that still holds today with the bar mitzvah and stuff, mm-hmm. Right?
Yep, exactly, and that's why the bar mitzvahs are at that age, 12 to 13, and you know, and bar mitzvah means that bar is son, mitzvah as a mitzvah is the commandments, that you become not just a son of your father, but you become a son of the commandments. You become a son of the Torah. You basically become, that's a way of saying you become a son of God's word. You're being responsible. And so, and bat mitzvah as well, a daughter of the word, a daughter of the commandments of God. In other words, you're going to be responsible for what you say, for what you do. You know, it's not between, I'm not going to spank you. You're standing before Yahweh now. And so it is. But what's interesting is that God asked Abraham to do this, and he did it, not just to him, not just to his son, but to all his people. So Abraham obeyed, and it's like the last thing we're reading in chapter 17. Well, the whole chapter 17 is kind of about that, and the sign of the covenant, and that everybody that comes in, whether they're foreigners, whether they're somebody he's bought with money, a slave, whoever, they all have to be circumcised. They're all part of that covenant. And so Abraham obeyed, and what happened? The very next thing we see, the last thing in this chapter, like is 26, is that the very same day Abraham was circumcised, and his son Ishmael, all the men in his house, born in his house, and he brought with money in a forum where they were all circumcised. And what happened when they were obedient? Very next verse. And Yahweh appeared to him. You know, they stepped into covenant, they stepped into obedience, and Yahweh appeared to him. So there's another amazing pattern with Abraham. And even when Abraham really didn't do it right, they didn't wait on God. Him and Sarah's like, okay, we'll do it this way. Like, I didn't tell you to do it that way. Okay? But even then, God said, do this. He did it, and boom, Abraham obeyed, God appeared. So another amazing picture there of Abraham.
Sets the precedent for us.
It does, and I think the whole story of Abraham, that's what's so important when what he's doing is, some of the lessons that we see from there are just so profound that, his faith is counted as righteousness. That's not New Testament, that's Abraham, okay? His faith is counted as righteousness, and then he's obedient here, and the obedient produces blessings. Yahweh appears to him. And now his hospitality, he has gained favor with these men, okay? Even knowing who they are, he's gained favor with his hospitality. And now what? He gets to intercede because now he's in relationship. So now he has opportunity to intercede. We were kind of playing church signs with the congregation down the street a few months ago. There it says, with God, all things are possible. And I put on this one, even impossible becomes possible. Because we don't think about the fact, and that's what Sarah's struggling with. Abraham's struggling with that. It's like, okay, all things are possible, but there's things that are impossible, right? Not with God, other than he can't lie. And yet it used to really bother me. Why can't God lie? And then I realized that because when he speaks, it is, because he's the creator. And so when he speaks, the universe, which is created by his speech, every atom, every quark, every molecule in the universe obeys him. It's his stuff. It's not like this is somebody else's stuff. It's his stuff. He spoke it into existence. So when he says that water is there, it's there. And he says, you're no longer there, you're no longer there.
That's what we don't want to hear.
Yeah, we don't want to hear that. But in reality, because he's creator, then when he speaks, it is. So he speaks reality. And so when he speaks that these things are possible, from an earthly standpoint, Abraham and Sarah is like, we have to help him. Yeah, we got to come up with something, because at 99 years old, this is just not possible. Both of them are over 90, like, no, this doesn't sound like... Sarah's probably not too excited about it. It's like, I'm going to have a baby. Okay, you better talk to somebody else.
I doubt you want to go down the rabbit hole, but the sages say that when Yahweh started speaking for creation, that his voice is what holds it together, and if he ever stops speaking, that it's all going to disintegrate. And we looked at that once in a Midrash, where that's where that fire comes in, that fervent fire that destroys everything.
So it's the earth, and it is his word that holds it together. In fact, there's verses that say that that is held together by the word of God. And so they just expound on that if it's ever not spoken, that it will, and they use the quotes actually in the New Testament, that the earth melts with a fervent heat because it just disintegrates.
Amen.
And so we have a responsibility of obedience, which is really what we're seeing here, that they're just trusting God even when things look absolutely impossible. So if with God all things are possible, then that includes what's impossible. And I think that's the only place we struggle. Honestly, I think it's, if I see, I know if I work really hard that could happen, and so Lord help me, I'm going to work really hard. But when it's like looking like that can't even happen, dead end. And that's when miracles happen. It's like, diagnoses and things like that. Oh, you're never going to do this. You're never going to do that. Like, you just a guy. What do you know? I serve the King of the universe. Okay? And with him, all things are possible. I mean, doctors get to see some amazing miracles. They really do. They don't get to talk about it too much, but they get to see them. Just incredible stuff. There's the book, and then there's the miracles. So, in 14, is anything too hard for Yahweh? At the moed, at the appointed time, okay? When is it that everybody you have to make sure that everybody's circumcised? That's for Passover, right? And so there's an appointed time for everything. There's appointed time here. It'd be interesting to see and calculate when this is, but most likely that would make sense that may be when this is. And so a picture of Messiah coming as well. But at the appointed time, I will return. It's kind of a play on words there. He's going to return at the appointed time. And did Yeshua return at the appointed time when everybody was to be circumcised at Passover? And then the Lamb appeared. Yes, he did. And you will have a son. And so then it gets kind of interesting. Read 16 through the end of 21. I'm sorry, go ahead, Richard.
In chapter 19, verse 3, the last half, you were talking about Passover. It says that Abraham baked matzah for their supper.
Oh yeah.
Passover.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It does say that. It does say that. Very interesting. So that actually
Puts it in that
would
season.
play it potentially. Potentially. All the pieces are here to make it be that time of year. So we see all the, and it very, very likely could be, because this is typical of, of the patterns that will be there before we even realize what they are. And so it's very possible that it is. Yeah, that's a good point. It does say that, unleavened cakes. Hasty cakes. Y'all have heard of tasty cakes, right? Well, have you ever heard of hasty cakes? These are hasty cakes.
Hasty and tasty.
Hasty cakes. These are hasty, tasty cakes. Okay, these are ones made in haste. Hasty cakes. We're to make some of those kosher hasty cakes. Actually, Christy does. They're called chocolate matzah, but that's another story. All right, go ahead, Mark.
16.
16, yeah.
Then the men rose up and looked toward Sodom, and Abraham went with them to see them on their way. Then the Lord Yahweh said, should I hide from Abraham what I am doing? Since Abraham will surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth would be blessed in him. I chose him, and he will instruct his children and his household after him to keep the way of Yahovah by doing righteousness and justice, so that Yahovah may bring to Abraham what he promised him. Then Yahovah said, bring the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grave, I will go down and see what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has come to me. If not, I will know. The men turned away from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before Yahweh. Then Abraham drew near and said, shall you destroy the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous in the city? Shall you also destroy and not spare the place for the 50 righteous who are in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing as this, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be treated like the wicked. Far from it from you. Should not the judge of all the earth do right? So Yahweh said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare the entire place for their sakes. Then Abraham answered and said, I who am but dust and ashes have taken it upon myself to speak to Yahweh. Suppose there were less than 50 righteous. Will you destroy all the city for lack of 5? And he said, if I find 45 there, I will not destroy it. And he spoke to him yet again and said, suppose there will be 40 found there. So he said, I will not do it for the sake of the 40. Then he said to him, let not Yahweh be angry, and I will speak. Suppose there be 30 found there. Again he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. He said, behold, I have undertaken to speak to Yahweh. Suppose 20 are found there. He said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Then he said, Let not Yahweh be angry, and I will speak only once more. Suppose 10 will be found there. Then he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. So Yahweh went his way as soon as he had stopped speaking to Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place.
So he's literally speaking to Yahweh in the flesh. We know who that is. The same being that killed the lamb and supplied the skins, the animal skins for Adam and Eve in the garden. Okay, so this, again, it's not new. It's interesting there that we have God in the flesh. Obviously, and I think I shared with you guys the other day about where Moshe asked to see God's glory. And after he's been talking to him for a long time, happened if you look at what he's actually saying, Moses has been talking to God the whole time. I mean, he goes up to the mountain, he talks to him, he comes down, and he goes back up, and he comes back down, and he goes up and he talks to him, he spends time with him. But he finally says, and it gets translated, I want to see you, I want to see you, I want to see your glory. That's what it says. What he's really asking is, he realizes he's talking to God in the flesh who is veiled. And he basically says to Yeshua, I want to see you in your glorified state. Wherein Yahweh says, you can't look on me. He's been looking on him the whole time. But he's like, you can't see that and live. I'll let you see the backside. That's when he comes down glowing just from seeing the backside of him, of his glorified body. That was really what he recognized. And so what we have here is basically Yeshua, obviously not in that when he was born as a baby, but God in the flesh, so why not call him Yeshua? And it seems that, this is just me, it seems that when God is in the flesh, like Yeshua, he has veiled himself, obviously, so he can be with men. And he also, of course, he doesn't cease to exist outside of time when he's inside of time, because he's the creator of time. Time has no effect on him whatsoever. But when he steps inside of time, he's actually in time. But what's interesting about that is it seems like he operates more like a man. Even though he has the ability to, reach through time, even, as he's here, like Yeshua saw what was going to happen, knew what people were going to say. Anytime he wanted to see it, he could. I can call 12 legions of angels. I'm like, I have access. So I am the access code.
He keeps his divine attributes kind of, like
Keeps
you say,
them,
veiled.
Yeah, veiled, I guess is the best word. And we see that here, is the reason I'm bringing all that up, is he makes this strange statement. Verse 21. I will go down now and see whether they have done according to the outcry against it that has come to me. And if not, I will know. How could Yahweh not know? The only way he can't know is if he's talking in his fleshly body that he's standing in, that he's veiled, that he's not literally seeing everything. But then on top of that, when he goes, he don't go. He sends the angels. We'll look at that in just a second. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say, it reminds me of when he said that he would not enjoy the fruit of the vine again until he's in the kingdom.
Yeah.
So that's a physical thing, enjoying the fruit of the vine.
Exactly.
But also here, he knew, he was just seeing what Abraham would say. He was trying to, show Abraham how he values the righteous. And we should take hope in that, because Abraham was kind of like saying, well, if you have this many, well, will you do this? Or if you have this many. And he was showing Abraham how he values the righteous. And if there's some righteous, he's not going to destroy it. And we should take hope in that in our country, because God values the righteous. And we may be sowed like tares and weed across our country, but God values us, and we can count on him.
It's interesting. Well, this is actually where you get several things. This is one of the first places that Rabbinic Judaism came up with the idea of requiring 10 men for a minyan, because Abraham did not go below 10. Now, what's interesting is that Yeshua does, but at this point in time, he didn't, because Abraham didn't. But Actually, the number 10 is extremely significant in the Bible, especially in the Torah. In Genesis chapter 1, in creation, God actually says 10 times, or the Bible says, and God said. He spoke 10 times. God said. God said. So you get that picture of 10. And of course, so it's kind of a picture of his power, of his creative power. And of course, we know how many commandments there are. There's 10, and he calls it the 10 words. Spoke the 10 words, or the 10 sayings. Ask us to give how much? A tenth. Tithe literally means tenth, as a testimony of our faith. What day is the Passover lamb chosen? 10th day. What day did Yeshua come into Jerusalem? On the 10th day. And so, and the 10 commands, as we look at, at Joshua, and the 10 in stone by the finger of God twice, because we broke them. I'm encouraged by that. God writes the commandments in stone with his finger, and then we break them. And he wrote more. He wrote them again. They didn't change. He just restored them. That's almost like a picture of the restoration we go through. And then in the 7th month, we just went through that a while back. On the 10th day of the month is the Day of Atonement. And so there's just this pattern of tens. I think, how many spies did they send into the land? 10, representing, 10, well, the 10 northern tribes went into the wilderness. Ruth sent 10, I think it was Ruth sent 10 spies in, or 10 witnesses. Ruth called 10 witnesses in. So that there's a lot of, there's go ahead, Richard, because we were talking about that. I didn't remember what all we came up with.
The minion issue is represented in the entire authority structure within Israel, and I personally believe protracted into the kingdom, that there were leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of 50s, down to leaders of 10. Mm-hmm. And what we were talking about texting last night was that I had wondered if Lot had 3 married daughters, mm-hmm. because that number came down to 10. If Lot had 3 married daughters and the 2 daughters still at home, their husbands would have made it 10 people.
But we found out that wasn't the case. So he had 2. Yeah, it's in Ruth. I was looking it up. It's in Ruth 4:2, where she took 10 witnesses. It seemed like that, again, and I think what you had said, I was just looking at your text, it said that 10 is a level that groups were recognized. In other words, less than 10, you're talking about individuals. At 10, you start to talk about groups of 10, which is what you're mentioning just then. And that kind of at 10, you're starting to become a group. So the other thing is that's here is, what I want you to see is Abraham is not challenging God's what's the word? That he's not righteous. He's not challenging God's righteousness when he says that. It gets divided up into verses here. But what he's actually doing is Abraham came near. Suppose there are 50. Abraham came near and said, would you destroy the righteous with the wicked? We already know the answer. Suppose there were 50 righteous. Would you destroy it? No. And he's nope. And he takes it down to 10. So at 10, now we're dealing probably more with individuals, I think is what it's, you won't destroy it for the sake of 10. But my point was, I think this idea of 10 10 being a significant number in even this ancient Middle Eastern culture is not new. This stuff goes way, way, way back. Everything you see Abraham doing, most of that cultural stuff is not new. It's right up here, Wayne.
He was also Shemaim. He basically demonstrated the Shema, to love God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind, and to love one another. And it was that he was actually doing that in the presence of God at that moment.
And it's so basically what I'm saying is Abraham is not challenging God. He's actually honoring God for who he is. He's not arguing with him. He is negotiating, but based on, and I said before that his hospitality to them is hospitality to these men, even if he knew who they were. He's developed a relationship, and now he feels comfortable getting in a very close and serious relationship, conversation, I should say, with Yahweh. Think about if we need to have a serious and close conversation with Yahweh and we don't have a relationship with him. How are you going to do that? You're not. And so it's this, it's really his hospitality. I mean, if we're following God and doing what we're supposed to be doing and praying and have a relationship, which is what he's done here, over time Abraham developed a relationship with God, and he's trusting him, he's following him, he's listening to him. And he don't mind interceding. It's opened the door for him to intercede for these cities, and there are 5 cities actually. And so we may be talking about, we're really talking about 10 per city even. So we say Sodom and Gomorrah, but there's I can't even think of the names of them now. Is it Zebulun? And I can't think of the name. There's 5 of these cities. Today they're not coming to my mind, but and so but it was kind of the second part of the interesting thing about him appearing in the flesh. He says, I got to go down and see this. And in chapter 19 it says, and the two angels left. He said, I won't do it, but said Abraham returned, I won't destroy it for 10. So Yahweh went his way as soon as he had finished speaking to Abraham. And that's a kind of a Hebraism. It could mean he just kind of disappeared. He just kind of went away. But the 2 angels went on down to Sodom and Gomorrah. And so that's interesting because we see that there were 3 people showed up. And now one of them gets defined as, one of them's Yahweh, and then clearly the other 2 angels go on down to Sodom. Right? And so in 19, the 2 angels came to Sodom in the evening, and Lot was sitting by the gate of Sodom. And Lot saw them. He arose to meet him, and he bowed himself and his face toward the ground. And he said, Hear now, my lords, please turn your servant's house, spend the night, wash your feet, rise early, go on your way. What are we seeing? Where did Lot come from? He comes from the same culture. Okay? And so we see him being totally humble, but yet, why is he sitting in the gate? Why do we need to know where he's sitting? He could be sitting on the rooftop. What would it matter? There's no idle words in the Bible. Why is he sitting in the gate, somebody? That's where the judges of the city sat. He's and by judges, not just a judge, but go ahead, Richard.
It's not only the judges sit there, they do sit there, and that's where they administer judgment. But it also talked about in other places in the scripture where the city-town center was the seat of hospitality. They didn't have a Holiday Inn, and they didn't have all the facilities that we have today. And so we were instructed, our forefathers were instructed to issue hospitality to people that are standing in the courtyard there, and also people that were seeking work would be in that courtyard. So it was a hub of where things were going on.
Well, if you think about it, you have no means of communication other than talking to people. where can you guarantee to see everybody in the city? They're going to go in and out the gate sooner or later. And so basically this was City Hall. This is the courthouse. And so all official business took place at the gate. It also and this is not unique to any particular town. This is the ancient Middle East, all operated this way. This is obviously not a righteous town. But Lot is there, and in fact, just drop down here real quick. Verse 9. He's had the conversation with the angels and all this, and the men of the city's like, stand back. They said, this guy come to stay here and he keeps acting as a judge. We'll deal with him. Why does it say that? Because he's sitting in the gate as a judge. Okay? And that's as somebody with authority, basically. And so they've recognized him, if nothing else, as somebody having wisdom and some kind of authority. Okay? And they have accepted him there, even though a lot of them don't like him because he's a righteous judge, and obviously they don't like righteous judges. But what we do see is in verse 19:2, it's the same kind of hospitality that we seen Abraham doing. You know, that the angels are wanting to spend the night in the square, and he's like, oh no, you can't do that. And he's like, you got to come in the house. And he makes some hasty cakes again, and then the men of Sodom come in and they call him and say, bring these men out. And basically they want to have sex with him. And he shuts the door behind him. He's like, no. And this freaks people out. Is verse 8. He said, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Take them, do what you would. Do nothing to these men, since this is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof. Those are not idle words. This is life and death. Yes?
Do you see any correlation between the 3 men that encountered Abraham and the Trinity? Mm-hmm. Or is that too much of a stretch?
When you initially look at it, it looks like that's the case, but when you look here and see who they actually are, we're seeing that they are specifically 2 angels. And so that's why I kind of went there. Because it says that in 18:32, Yahweh's they're debating with Abraham, and that the angels have actually left. Where do they actually walk away? Verse 22, in 18:22, it says the men turned away from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham stood before Yahweh. And so what's happened there, 3 characters approached, 2 of them left Yahweh talking to Abraham, and we're not positive who they are until we get to 19:1, and then we realize that the 2 who left, there clearly are angels. It says they are. And so there are angels there, and they're the ones that, it's interesting that in 18:22, Yahweh says, I'll go down, but he sent his angels. But it gets even more interesting in that when the fire comes down. So we'll get to that one in a minute. But anyway, so they encounter Lot, and what I don't want you to miss here is we do see later on where we see that his daughters have not known a man, and yet when the angels are about to destroy it, they say, in verse 19:14, it says, so Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law who had married his daughters and said, get up and get out of this place. And I'm going, are these guys so perverted and homosexual that they've married women and haven't even consummated the marriage? And that's really not the case. The case is that the language here is that the word here for marriage is not what we would think. It's trying to think. It's not betrothed, but that's what it means.
Spoken for.
Okay, it means they have made a commitment, and so basically they are in the same situation as Mary and Joseph. And so this is more than just, betrothed, we don't even have a concept of betrothed. The betrothed here is so serious. This is a covenant. They've made a covenant, they're betrothed, and to get out of it, you need a divorce, which is very complicated. It's serious business. If anybody betrays anybody during this period, they can be stoned. Okay, so this is the same as they are married in this culture, and marriage is taken very seriously. But they haven't physically moved in together, and that's why they're not there. They haven't consummated the marriage. They're not physically together. And I mentioned that they're not married here. I've mentioned this situation once before and said marriage starts when you have sex. And somebody took that exponentially and went out and told everybody that PJ said that every time you have sex, you're married to that person. I'm like, no, but spiritually speaking, you have opened a door that in the spirit realm, that's the way it's supposed to be. So you've created this bond. You've crossed this bizarre spiritual path where you are spiritually connected to them, where you actually need to break soul ties. And so in a spiritual sense, it creates all kind of havoc. But are you actually married to them? No. So you have to look at the situation. It depends. But so I had to do some real clear teachings on what's marriage and what's not, since people don't seem to know anymore. It seems like the world doesn't know anymore. Seriously, you believe we've actually got to sit up here and teach what marriage is? Yeah, we do. Because people don't know. But the problem is not new. We see the problem back here thousands of years ago. The problem is that we can operate 100% in the flesh, and that's what's going on in Amorah, which is the real name of this place, Sodom and Gomorrah. But what I want you to see here is why is Lot, and I know you know, Wayne, because so Wayne can't answer this one. Unless somebody else answers it, and then Wayne gets the answer. He's got verse 8, I got 2 daughters that don't know a man, I'll bring them out. You do whatever you want to with them. Don't mess with these men. This is the reason they have come under the shadow of my roof. Why is he willing to give up? Y'all 3 don't count either. I want a new person. See, the old Torah students go get the answer stuff. And the people that didn't raise your hand, seriously, this sounds bizarre. I get it. Why would this guy be willing to give up his daughters to these men to do whatever you want to with, to protect 2 guys he don't even really know?
He knew they didn't want them. He knew they wouldn't want his daughters. They weren't after his daughters.
Okay, that's the
perversion.
All right. She said, yeah, okay. I hear you. Anybody else? Come on, somebody try it. Go ahead. Just take a swing at it. Yeah, go. I want over there in the back. Does it say he knows? No, it doesn't say that he knows. I don't think he knows for sure, because he honors them. I don't think he knows they are, because if he truly, think about it, if they look like men too, because it says when they walk up, it's just Abraham thinks it's 3 men. Hey, I'll get you something to eat, a little bite of me, And so I think they're as veiled as Yahweh was, and because in reality, if he realized that they are angels and how powerful they really are, he wouldn't have been worried. Go ahead, sleep in the street. I'm going to sit back and watch this, because somebody's about to get a butt kicked by a powerful angel. Try it, somebody. Go ahead. Somebody. I want to see somebody try it. Why would Lot, this is serious, why would Lot be willing to give up his daughters? This is a cultural thing. I'll tell you that. It's from culture. There's not a command for this. Why would he be willing to give up his daughters, his virgin daughters? Do whatever you want. This is the reason these men came under my roof, the shadow of my roof. That's the key. That's a cultural phrase. Go ahead. We're just, and I'm not putting you on the spot. This is just,
maybe the level of hospitality that living under the culture of hospitality they had, that he was on?
He's on track.
Basically, yes, yes. And that basically is what it is. The level, and that's why I'm saying the level of hospitality and the level of understanding and responsibility of taking in guests, we can't, no, you can't answer this. We can't wrap our head around. We really can't. This is what's referred to in the culture and today, looking back on the culture, as, let Wayne do it.
1, 2.
I'm gonna let Wayne do it. Go ahead.
Well, let me just give one
Run with
more
it for a minute.
hint.
Yeah, go ahead.
You know, in the movie Lone Survivor, you saw this.
I didn't see the movie.
Oh, well, I was talking generally to the crowd.
Okay.
When
They didn't see it. Who saw the movie? Lone Survivor. 1, 2, 2. Sorry. I killed my TV years ago.
When the one man in the community took the soldier in and defended him with his life and his family.
Yeah, and certainly historically that's happened. In fact, let's just think about that for a minute. How many in World War II, for example, when the Jews were fleeing Nazism, took them in, and I mean, look, Corrie ten Boom's book and stuff like that, and all the people who risked their lives. That really is the same thing. They literally risked their lives to save these people's lives. Yeah, go ahead.
When you were talking about Lot going out with his daughters, and before when it said they were married, he talked to the son-in-laws. Okay, and we talked about betrothal, okay? And I think that's even over there today. They're betrothed, but they don't go to get the wife until the father says it is time. The house is prepared.
Yeah,
Is
they go
that,
to prepare
are
a
we
place.
looking at that there?
No.
No.
No, that's not what this is, but that is a good point, and that does still go on, particularly in the Bedouin culture. You know the answer to this, right? Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Threshold covenant.
Okay.
Yep.
So, go ahead.
I just want to make a comment about the veil. You know, they're veiled, and that's kind of a broad word. You don't really know. It's hard to understand what it means. And
I don't know how else to say it.
But how about the word disguise? They were in disguise.
Or veiled.
Yeah, they were veiled, but this disguise is so perfect that nobody sees through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, more than a mask, though. It's
they look like men.
They look like men. Exactly, they were men.
So yeah.
But
they look just like men. I mean, Yeshua looked just like a man. He lived just like a man.
And yeah, and that's
he was
nothing.
tempted
God,
in every way, just like we are,
God
except
put
without sin.
himself in disguise.
So
We didn't
I don't want
recognize
to get too far off of why is this guy willing to give up his daughters? And let's stay. Yeah, but it's more. But understand what that is. You want to go ahead?
I just wanted to ask, the threshold covenant, did it start with Passover because of the blood being on the threshold?
No, it's ancient. It's way before that. We're 1,500 years before that already. Basically, what it is, and Yoel is very close. When they took, in other words, they're going to sleep on the street, and he said, "No, come into my house." And so, when you bring somebody into your house for safety, you're safe. You basically just said, anybody out there has got to come through me to get to you. So my life, my house, my family is going to put their life on the line to protect you. It's really part of that culture where we saw, that hospitality culture. This is how extreme it gets. And so when they allow them to come into the house to spend the night, to eat and spend the night, there's a whole there's like a physical thing that can happen and all of this, and I'm not getting into all that because it was always different depending on where you were and what time period. And there's literally lentils that have bowls in them where they had even blood, where it was even a blood covenant as part of it. But having said all that, it ends up exactly what Margaret's talking about. That the Passover lamb, the blood on the doorpost, is a threshold covenant. So what started way back here and was common in the culture God used to bring it forward and make it even more powerful, that not just is the person who owns the house going to protect them, okay, whoever comes under his roof. So that is the reason they came under the shadow of my roof. He's like, nobody's coming in here. Yahweh just did that for us. Like, this is the threshold. Go inside the house and you'll be safe. You get out here, you're not safe. And so the blood of the lamb is the threshold. So that is an awesome picture of it. Yes, right there.
So then does that mean that he would be responsible to God literally for their lives?
Say that one more time. Is he responsible?
To God. He would be responsible to God literally for those two men's lives.
I don't think it.
It's like the American serviceman. He puts his life on the line. He would defend those guests under his roof because of the covenant, because of the implied rule of that covenant. He would risk his life, his family, everything he owned.
That's closer to the answer. So it's not in fear of God. It's just, this is his stand. Yeah, like Wayne said, I said you will be safe if you go in here. End of story. That's the boundary. That's the line. And so one of the things Wayne and I have talked about over the years is like, how does this apply today? When parents and friends bring adult young men or whatever into their house, and drama starts and all, it's like, you got to be careful who you bring into your house, because spiritually there's a level of responsibility on the person to protect them. But at the same time, why are we making these type covenants and we don't understand our house? I think part of the thing is we don't understand how important spiritually our house is. If we protect it spiritually and we're careful spiritually what we bring in, we can keep a house spiritually clean. And I think that's part of this picture, at least, of the threshold covenant, is we're being cautious what comes in. We're being cautious what kind of material comes in. And sometimes it comes in through a cable or a Wi-Fi connection, okay? You need to be careful what's coming in the house, because the head of the house, is responsible for what's in the house. And here we see Lot putting his life on the line to protect these people. So it is a threshold covenant. There's a series of covenants. Of course, we've already seen blood covenant. That's what Abraham's dealing with. Yeshua, of course, is the fulfillment of the most extreme picture of a blood covenant, where you got God himself providing the lamb who is the lamb. Go ahead, Jan.
I understand what you're saying about having strangers come into your home. Mm-hmm. And you explained the two virgins that he was willing to give up his daughters. Because what I've been told or led to believe was that the custom at the time then was that women were just chattel.
Well, there's some truth to that. There is some truth to that. I mean, he knows they're not going to kill him. But today we shudder at the thought. But at the same point, these men were willing to kill him, it seems. I mean, they're basically saying they were going to kill him or beat him or whatever we're going to do to them, it's going to be worse for you, is basically what they've said. And he's like, no. And so he tries to negotiate. And there may be some, and I hear what you're saying. It's like he knew that they didn't want them, and that may be true. And maybe he's playing on that. Maybe he's playing all his cards, basically. He's playing whatever he has. But And so we don't know the details. He's probably thinking everything, but the reality is nothing he's trying is going to work. But go ahead, John.
Another thing that that was brought to my attention is that, we always think of Sodom and Gomorrah being mostly homosexual. And he knew that if he gave them his 2 daughters, those girls were probably as good as being safe, because these men wanted the men that were in his house, the people that outside. You know what I'm saying? The deviance was so intense that you could have sent them 1 woman or 2 women or 10. They didn't want women. They wanted the guys. That's how bad and deviant these men were.
I mean, it's obviously it's a very extreme place, and to the point where, this has became the, it's where the word sodomite comes from, Go ahead.
Couple issues, couple comments about the totality of the conversation. The order of the threshold covenant, when he was going to defend them and offering his daughters. I know this is going to sound strange, but there is a order to the way the negotiation goes, and Lot was doing that. Of course, at any time you can change up and draw a sword and hit the man at the door. You could escalate it anytime you want, but there is an order to how these things were done, and that's what the daughters, bringing up the daughters were.
Yeah, that's the offering.
Like a bargain.
Buying them off, yeah.
Yes. Second, these covenants, we don't think about them much in this country. We don't understand them. You've already said earlier, you made the connection with sex. And the spiritual, in the original process of that, that is a threshold blood covenant all at once.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's very deep.
Yeah, it is, and we won't go there.
I know,
but
that explains the union of the marriage and the covenant.
I think the point you just made is that we don't understand covenants. I mean, look at the divorce rates, and it's very obvious we don't understand covenants, and that's why I've started teaching covenant marriage. And covenant marriage is a whole lot different than going down to the courthouse and getting a piece of paper. Because, go ahead.
And also going back, like with Abraham when he was negotiating, he knew God's will is that none be lost. And so it was a conversation that was permissible to have with God under that circumstance.
Right.
But when he brought it down to 10, he knew that Sodom and Gomorrah, the nature of the place, it was also like, I know Lot went there and he went with the family. I don't know how many he has under his roof now, but he took it down to 10 in case it was that few.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it was a picture. Yes, it was the whole city, but when you put it, he knew who was there. Lot was there and his family.
Yeah.
And taking it down to 10.
You would hope they would be 10.
That group you were talking about.
Yeah.
And I think that's significant of why it was down to 10 as well.
It's unfortunate that we don't understand covenants. But hopefully they're being restored also. As the reality is, we're going from gray to you're over here or you're over here. People are waking up and seeing truth and seeing covenants and seeing things like this and like covenant marriage and starting to understand covenant marriage and what that's about. And that 2 men can't be in a covenant marriage because marriage is defined by God. You can have a state union marriage, but that the states redefined it in legal terms as opposed to spiritual terms, so that you really have 2 different things we're dealing with now. Go ahead. That messed you up, then. It's like that was easy.
Yeah, we definitely don't understand covenants in the West, but we haven't been raised with them. We haven't been taught about them. They, you know, they, 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 They lived with them over there. They understood what a covenant was.
Yeah.
But Lot also, Sodom and Gomorrah, it wasn't just the sexual. There was evil everywhere
yes,
in
not
there.
just that. In
And
fact, the
when
Bible
you've
talks
got
about that.
even a righteous person
fact, I wanna look
living
at
in that kind of environment, all around you, wherever he went, had an effect even on Lot.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And he understood that when he saw those two men enter the gate at the city.
Yep. Yep. Good Talmud, Sandra Fowler called it. She texted me and said, "Threshold covenant." Good job. Go ahead.
In bringing that up about Lot, so back in chapter 13, when Lot and Abraham separated, Lot took all his herds and herdsmen. So that means there was other families that assimilated into Sodom and Gomorrah that were left behind, and only Lot and his.
We would hope, but when they separated, they didn't. His herdsmen would have taken the
Outside of the city.
the plain, which is a large area at that time, and it was beautiful at that time. Because after this, it's not. But at that time, it's like Lot chose it. And when you get there, what's interesting about it geographically is there's this just plain and valley that goes for many, many, many miles along the Dead Sea. It's a flat area. And then there's a cliff face that goes up 300 feet, probably. I mean, like pretty steep. In most places, you can't climb it. Most places you can't climb it. I mean, it's that steep. And they're up there on that plateau. You want that or you want this? And both of them are flat, but it's just an incredible fault line there where the earth has shifted by hundreds of feet. And Lot's like, I want that, because he's looking down on it and it's beautiful. And so he takes that. So his herdsmen, I'm thinking, would have been there, but he ends up moving into the city. So I think you're right. He did have more people. The question is, were they in the city? And unfortunately, the whole cities and the plains and everything got destroyed. So, I guess they were hoping that they were righteous too. So that's a good point. Yes, Richard.
The New Testament says that Lot was vexed daily by the iniquity
I'm
in
on
Sodom.
my way to that. That's 2 Peter, right?
I think it is, where it says it's vexed his spirit daily.
I'm looking for it. Yes.
Well, I just wanted to make a comment when you did.
Oh, I know where it is. I wrote it down earlier. It's like, where did I write it? I'm like looking on my phone. Go ahead. Go ahead, Mark.
About the covenant attitude in this country. It seems like even to the extent that we do understand them, and I'm just speaking generally and not singling anybody out, but it seems like to the extent that we do understand them as a society, we still approach it very casually and don't take it seriously.
Yeah. There's two places that mention it. It's in 2 Peter 2. We'll look them up here. And also in Jude. In Jude 1, it says, talking about that, it says, even as... it says, it's talking about the angels who are bound under darkness waiting for the great judgment day. And it goes on, it says, even as Sodom and Gomorrah, the cities around them, having in the same way as these given themselves over to sexual immorality and gone after strange flesh, are shown as an example, suffering punishment, or King James says vengeance there, of eternal fire. Okay, and so it now, and we talked about this one the other night in the Revelation study about the idea of eternal fire and eternal destruction, and that was the verse I was actually looking for. It's in Jude 1:7, and what it means is not that the fire is eternal; it's that the punishment is eternal. And the Greek, being very specific here, says suffering the punishment, not the punishing, the punishment of eternal fire. It didn't say the punishing of eternal fire. The punishing of eternal fire would mean the punishing goes on forever, eternity. It says the punishment of eternal fire, which means you can't recover from this one. It's done.
That would be eternal separation from Yahweh.
Well, it's eternal destruction. It's not separation, it's destruction. And it's using, basically, it goes on and uses that kind of as a picture of the second death. It's not the second separation, it's the second death, because the Bible says that God alone has immortality. And so if you look out in the case, it's about the third level up. There's a whole level there of Sodom and Gomorrah. There's the salt from there, there's the ashes from there, there's the brimstone from there. It's not burning, but this is thousands and thousands of years ago, and it's totally destroyed. The punishment was eternal. Like you could put a herd down there today and they would starve to death because there's nothing to eat. There's just it's just ashes and really nothing grows there to speak of. Go ahead.
Reading the definition, it says execution of a sentence. That's punishment.
Okay.
So it's the finalization of the sentence.
Okay. All right. And then the second place that it talked about Lot, trying to figure out what kind of character Lot is, because when you see Lot dealing with Abraham, you're not really sure what kind of character this is, because ultimately God doesn't appear to him until he separates himself from Lot. So we're like, what's going on with Lot? It's 2 Peter 2:5 is where it starts. And it says, and God did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah and 7 others, a preacher of righteousness, when he brought the flood on the world of the ungodly. And turned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemning them to destruction, having made them an example, or ensample, Old English, to those who would live in an ungodly way. And so that word ensample in Greek is a really fun word. Let's see if I can pronounce it. I could pronounce it earlier. Upadigma, it looks like. I can't say it. But the definition is, the ensample is, it's a sign, a representation, a figure, or a warning of a thing to be shunned. So when we look at Sodom and Gomorrah today, it's like, okay, we really don't want to go there because the outcome is not good. But it says, he turned the cities in Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, and delivered righteous Lot, who was very distressed by the lustful life of the wicked. That's what you're referring to. For that righteous man dwelling among them was tormented in his righteous soul from day to day, seeing and hearing the lawless deeds. And so that's a really good point, that Lot wasn't there participating in it. In fact, they don't like him because he's judging them. He's basically, sounds like, standing up against them. And it ends in 2:9. It says, for the Lord knows how to deliver the godly out of temptation and to keep the unrighteous under punishment for the day of judgment. So he knows how to deliver us out of temptation. That's important. So it's showing that even though Lot was living in this place, he's being tormented by it from day to day. And honestly, there's places, there's cities today where we would be tormented, and unfortunately, when you stay there too long, you start to get used to it, and that's where it's dangerous. Yes, Richard?
I was going to draw that same comparison. When we can vex ourselves watching our common entertainment, we can entertain the same deeds and the same destruction just by letting the media into our homes.
Like I said, it can come in all kinds of ways. Very often it comes in on the cable. So we do have to be careful with that for sure. Okay. Give Mark a big hand for helping me today. Yay, thank you, Mark.